Hey guys, welcome back to Festival Insider Podcast. Today we have a really exciting interview lined up. We have Scott Dennison on, who is a domestic and international risk professional. He has over 30 years of experience working in this field. And I think MJ and I can attest that today's topic is going to be a little bit more serious from some of the things we've talked about, but these are really important conversations we're going to have with Scott about event security. MJ has worked with Scott a few times. Do you want to talk a little bit about him and your relationship with him?
Definitely. So, I call him Uncle Scott, and that's because, I run to him with all the problems. He's like my uncle but a very intelligent guy who knows this industry so well and genuinely cares so much about the attendees and the staffers at each festival. He's always the first one to come and set up his massive RV that he has. He comes with his dogs. He's there. He lives on site of all the festivals I work with. He went with me to China, to Brazil, to the international events with us. He's there, and he's just the guy who has all the answers all the time. I'm not sure if he'll talk about his background, but obviously he comes from,
government.
Government, yeah. And has served the country, I'm sure, and now he is serving us. And I can list so many close calls that he saved us from. Wow. Just because he was quick to react, and I can't wait to start asking the questions.
Yep, and definitely for any fans listening, I think the best part about this is that you show up to the event to have a good time, and that's really all you're concerned about and thinking about. But what Scott's going to talk about today is everything all the moving parts behind the scenes that make sure that you can have a fun and safe experience. And I think it's going to be a lot of good things to think about and keep in mind and have an appreciation for after you hear him talk. So yeah, please join us in welcoming Scott Dennison to the podcast. Welcome to Festival Insider Podcast. We are really, really excited to have you on today. I feel like today's topic is different than anything we've covered so far, and it will be really interesting for the fans to hear your perspective. We have Scott joining us today. He is a domestic and international risk professional, which sounds like a very intimidating job title. So we want to hear a little bit about, what you do in the context of the entertainment industry and music festival industry, and just learn a little bit more about you. So if you could give us a quick introduction to yourself, who you are, where you're from, what you do.
Sure. My name is Scott Dennison. Live in north of Scottsdale, Arizona. Aside from traveling the planet, dealing with music festivals and getting to see MJ hopefully on a more regular basis coming up here this year. But I've spent probably the past 35 years plus in the live entertainment side of it, whether that be the sporting event world, being NFL football or any of the major sporting events, and then kind of transferred into the music industry, working on a couple tours. And then about 7 years ago, I was recruited by SFX Entertainment, where I got the opportunity to meet MJ and people like Rutger Jensen and a whole bunch of others. And really just focused in the past 7 years just on the music venues, festivals from 30,000 people to 180,000 people. So in the risk management side of it, I basically oversee the security perspective, medical, safety, and the insurance portion of it as it relates to the live event industry.
Wow. Yeah, that's a huge range in
How did you get into entertainment? Because, you're also a man of big background. We're probably not allowed to talk about any of it. So how did you get into the events? What was the first event that you have worked, and how did this happen?
I was actually the CEO of a large metal detector manufacturer, and I had been contracted by the U.S. Secret Service to provide all their metal detection technology for the Democratic and Republican conventions, the inauguration, just after 9/11, the Super Bowl. So I had been introduced to the live event industry via the U.S. Secret Service on the metal detection side. Now, as you can see, almost every sporting venue in the country has weapons detection as part of their overall security plan. And I think from a festival goer standpoint, what they don't realize is that there are so many different aspects that they don't see behind the scenes, such as the 80 paramedics and the 10 or 12 doctors that we have working on site. The only time they know they're there is if they get themselves in some type of medical problem. And then we have hundreds of security guards, which I'm sure you see when you're at festivals, but what you don't see are the security management layers that are behind it, weather operations, anti-terrorism operations, police, undercover operations. So there's a lot of different aspects that go into the festival world. And as I think Mr. Jansen said in a previous episode, we literally build a city in a matter of a few short weeks or days. And when you have 30,000 to 180,000 people at a show, it's like any big city. You have people with medical problems, you have crime sometimes. So it's a matter of trying to keep everybody safe. And that's just not just the patrons, but it's the vendors and the employees and everybody associated with the event.
Wow. Yeah, I have so many questions just popped up in my head. You kind of answered one of them. I was going to say, from a fan's perspective, what are some of the misconceptions they have about your job and the work that you're doing? Because their job is to show up and they know they're going through security and then they're there to have a good time, but they're not thinking about all of the things that have been put into place to ensure that they can have a good time and be safe throughout. So yeah, speaking to a fan right now, what misconceptions do you think they have about your job?
I think generally, I think the security people, for the most part, are there to make their life miserable. Mm-hmm. Like, you can't go in here, or we're going to arrest you, or something in a negative fashion. But I would say 80% of the work that the security and medical people do is really customer service related. We're there to help them. If they need directions to go somewhere, of course, they're not allowed on the stage, the general fan, but so we do have some credential access areas that people are prohibited from. Mm-hmm. But I mean, just a simple thing such as the weather, which creates, a whole host of problems for festival management and the patrons, is, we're going to have hail, lightning, high winds. All these things are going on behind the scenes with our security management team. So that we don't have to try to evacuate the site. And if we did because of weather, we have a complete evacuation plan that they're most likely not aware of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, MJ and I talked a little bit about weather. I was going to say, do you have questions about that?
In states, and different states will have different rules about what happens if the rain starts, and based on the state, then you'll have a plan, right? Or is it just federal and across all the states the same?
No, it's generally across all the states. It's the same. I mean, we have a team of meteorologists that work with us during a festival 24 hours a day. We also have what we call our event control center or command center, which is where everything that happens in the festival flows through this particular room. And we have camera systems, so we're watching what's going on, but we also are monitoring the weather, and we're in touch with the Severe Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma, so that we can predict the weather so we don't have to try to do an evacuation. And if we do, we want to do it in a safe and orderly fashion. And I know MJ's seen a few of these instances, in particular, Randall's Island in New York for Electric Zoo, Tomorrow World. There's a whole host of different venues where we've had to do an evacuation in order to keep the fans safe.
Mm-hmm.
And it always takes a very large team. Just for listeners and viewers who are not familiar, approximately, what would you say a festival with 30,000 people will have when it comes to security and medical personnel headcount? Approximately, how many people would be working the festival?
So just on a security, the management team alone is probably 15 to 20 persons. And then we probably would have 150 security guards in various roles. And then we're probably looking at a 40 to 50 person medical team. So, you know, you're in the hundreds of people, and we're there to help the patrons, to help the vendors, help the employees. Sometimes some of the employees, for whatever reason, get themselves in trouble. We're there to try to resolve that. And plus, we want to make sure everything's safe. So we're looking at trip hazards, water testing that's done prior to the actual event taking place, making sure that the water that people are drinking is safe, working with the health department to make sure that the food is safe. So there's many different aspects to the risk management part. It's almost like we have a giant toolbox and we bring out the appropriate tool for the particular incident that may occur.
Wow. I have a question about the weather as well, as far as like making the decision, or what is the threshold of, you know, we have to eventually evacuate. Like you said, I didn't realize you had meteorologists monitoring 24/7 during the event, but, you know, from a fan's perspective, they're just looking at it as like, oh, this is a buzzkill. It's just a little rain. We don't want to evacuate and miss the show. But what normally is the threshold for when you have to make that decision that, okay, weather is coming in really quickly, we have to get everybody out of here?
So we're looking at several different factors. One is, in the case of a thunderstorm, how far out is this thunderstorm and how fast is it coming towards us? Like you see on the weather reports, you know, the front is moving at 45 miles an hour. So we have various different types of what we call concentric rings around the site. So at 8 miles out or 20 miles out, we have to start making some decisions whether we should evacuate or shelter in place. And it really depends on the type of storm that's coming. In other words, it could be a wind event where we have to temporarily suspend programming because the wind threshold's too high for the stage. All these stages have engineering drawings, and those engineering drawings translate into what we call a high wind action plan. So in the event the wind, for example, exceeds 35 miles an hour, we may suspend the show until that wind dies down. And we may have to clear an area upwards of 200 feet away from the front of the stage, just in case there was a wind event that caused a problem with the stage. And then we have cases where it just rains and rains and rains, and is the ground capable of absorbing that amount of water and patrons still be able to have a good time? So it really depends on the type of storm and how fast it's moving. And the decisions are not just made by myself. It's made by the festival producer. It's made by the city government. And it's really a team approach. And that's where we bring all the members of this team into a room and we sit down and we go through what our decision-making process should be. And if we do decide to evacuate, we need time. You can't just click your heels and hope 30,000 people go home.
We'll listen. Yep.
And that's kind of look, one of the reasons we started the podcast. We want to build a stronger connection and community with everyone, fans and industry. And I think that when it comes to people like you, even the great people that are working with us, most of them don't understand how much work there is to do to set it up. And you know, a lot of people want to get into this and start a career working in live events, you know, and many will probably want to go into what Scott does in that field. And I got to tell you, I mean, months before the festival, Scott is already on emails at 5 a.m. The amount of planning he has to do before, during is as much as the rest of the team and more, probably for most people, because there's just so many variables to look at. You know, he's always on site earlier. As we start building, Scott is already there, and he's the last to leave, and he's the one who is trying to predict what happens on Sunday at 11 a.m. if it rains. We come to him and gather around him as he gives us all the options and the plans. So the amount of mental and physical work that goes into each of this festival is insane. And just another proof for you guys and ladies that are listening of how much work it really takes to get this type of work done. Incredible.
Yeah, usually we'll start meeting with city officials and start planning 6 to 8 months out. And the other thing that people don't see is the amount of intelligence information that we're getting. In other words, we're working with the FBI, local police, counterterrorism officials, social media monitoring, looking to see are there threats against the venue, are there threats against the artist, and trying to put all that into perspective. I mean, we can't create a prison-like environment, but we do have a multitude of layers of safety and security that we have to pay very close attention to. We're all familiar with the unfortunate incident that happened in Vegas at Route 91, where we had a lone shooter. So we're preparing and training for those types of events with local police and Department of Homeland Security. Sometimes we go to cities in the middle of nowhere and they have no clue what we're talking about. Could be a little local police department. So we work together as a team to educate them. And it's not just the electronic dance music world, country music, rock music, they all have festivals, and depending on the genre, people act differently based on the genre. Like the EDM festival goers are very, very easy to deal with. They'll generally listen to what you're trying to tell them.
Mm-hmm. I was going to ask too. I mean, I remember a couple of years back, there was the Pulse nightclub shooting, and right after that, about a week later, was EDC Las Vegas. And I remember there was just a very like tense energy because everyone felt a little nervous about going to that large scale of an event after that happening. And the security is always tight in New York and Las Vegas at these major events. But I just wonder, how do you strike a balance between having really, really tight security and making sure everybody's safe, but also, you know, not having metal detectors and certain things like that? Like, how do you strike a balance between what level of security you should have at these types of events?
Well, we do what we call a threat analysis. So we look to see what the potential threats are for that particular location. But there are some things that we look at from a national standpoint, you know, the lone shooter or the vehicle-borne improvised explosive device. So we're always trying to keep a standard platform, our emergency operations plan, the same across all cities and all venues. And some may require a little extra help, and that help could come in the form of maybe we need to do canine detection for explosives. In some locales we do that, and some we don't necessarily have to do that based on threat information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to ask you, I don't know if this is appropriate or not, but with the security going through with festival goers, I think a lot of the times on some of their minds, you know, they know that the dogs and things like that are there for protection and for safety. But I was going to ask, like, what percentage are looking for drug paraphernalia versus like weapons?
So here again, we basically deploy the asset based upon what the particular issue may be. So generally at a country music concert, we don't really have a narcotics problem for the most part.
Right.
So we don't necessarily want to take canine resources for narcotics detection as an example. However, in some other types of music genres where narcotics are prevalent, and we're not talking about marijuana because that's become pretty much mainstream across the country, or various locales, I should say. Then we bring out canine detection, and we're not there to put people in jail. It's more of a harm reduction scenario. And most prosecutors in a lot of these areas where we do festivals don't want to fill up their jail with people. So unfortunately, people try to bring, you know, some pretty bad narcotics with them, and we're trying to stop it at the front gate, because what happens is then it becomes a medical problem on the inside when people start overdosing. And we have incredible medical facilities at almost all of our venues where we do festivals. This includes doctors, RNs. We can pretty much treat somebody on site the same as they would at a hospital, unless it was a broken bone and they needed, you know, to get their bone set in some cases. But, you know, we transport the people to the hospital. There's no charge for the medical services that we provide on site to the patrons. And we don't want to overload the public health system in a community with people that happen to be tripping out on LSD, as an example, or have had too much to drink. I would say 6 or 7 years ago, they would just transport everybody to the hospital. There was no treatment on site. And so there would be 50 to 100 people a day going to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Here, it's pretty rare that we would send somebody to the hospital unless their life was in serious, serious danger.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And some festivals have literally a hospital set up on site as well for emergencies, right? I've seen a couple.
Correct. We have major medical facilities on site. So we can pretty much save somebody's life if they were in a heart attack. We have IV fluids, all types of things to stabilize a patient. If they need to be transported to the hospital, we'll transport them to the hospital. It really comes down to the doctor's decision that's on site.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also important for the fans listening too to educate themselves as well, because I think in certain circumstances, music festivals do an amazing job with medical, and a lot of them have ground control members who walk around and make sure everybody's okay, or if somebody's sleeping, laying down, they're actually sleeping, and they knock on bathroom doors and things like that. But I always say, like, educate yourself. Don't be afraid to go over to the medical tent, even if it's something as like dehydration and you need water or something like that. Like, be aware of where these tents are throughout the event so that you can save somebody's life or potentially like help them from whatever issue they're having. So they're your friends. To everybody listening, they're there to help you.
You're right. There is a big misconception, like, oh, I'll get in trouble. No, not at all. As Scott said, they're there to help. And so if something doesn't seem right, it's best to go right away and ask for help. That's why they're there for.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point about the ground control team. So, ground control is basically generally works for Insomniac in most of their festivals. There's another organization called Celebrate Safe or Ambassadors. And these are all people that are there for harm reduction. They're not there necessarily to provide you medical treatment. It's kind of a peer group that are there to look and see if you're showing any signs of distress. Maybe you just need to talk to somebody because you're depressed. They're there to help you. And they're just another set of eyes and ears for us. They may be handing out water, handing out earplugs. They're kind of our eyes and ears on the ground. And generally, they're all the same age as the festival goers.
Yep.
Scott, a lot what we talk about here is inspiring fans to travel all around the world and learn different cultures, eat different foods, just be in different places so that the memory is above and beyond. I got into the festival, danced my ass off, and then flew back home. When it comes to the international scene, I know, of course, you do a lot of international festivals as well. It seems like things are getting better and safer as more people are starting to travel. Before pandemic, I hear less and less of any kind of horror stories or sad situations. Are there any countries or territories in particular that you would advise people to be careful with? And then are there any tips for people that go internationally on what to do? I don't know, print out an embassy's phone number or get an extra passport, anything like that would help them?
So I think there's one thing, if you're a US citizen, that can help you, is the US Department of State has a thing called the STEP program, which is a site where you can go and register your name with the US State Department. And they ask for some information about, your date of arrival and what hotel you're staying at. And they're not there to spy on you. They're there in case there was a national emergency. They know where you are and they can get you back home. So I think you've seen cases where at the beginning of the pandemic, they had emergency flights out of a lot of Central and South American countries to get people home, including in China also. And it'll help you get on that chartered plane if you're registered in their system. They will come find you. So I'm a member of OSAC, which is the Overseas Advisory Security Council for the Department of State. And this is a big thing that we try to push with US citizens. Like, if you're traveling overseas, go ahead and register. It doesn't cost anything. It's free. It's part of what the US government's supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
COVID's kind of thrown kind of a monkey wrench into some of this stuff, and the fact that traveling overseas to a show has become a little bit more difficult because they're requiring you to have a COVID test prior to your departure to come back to the U.S. as an example. So that I wouldn't say, there's places you shouldn't travel, but one of the things that I found out is a lot of insurance companies, if the CDC recommends that you do not go to a particular country, a lot of private insurance companies will not pay for your medical expenses overseas, given the fact that you were warned not to travel there by the federal government.
And that's something people can check on CDC's website.
Correct. And then it really comes down to your own individual private insurance company having a discussion with them.
And that's interesting. I didn't even think about that point.
Mm-hmm.
I think, somebody asked me today, what's our COVID security plan for next month? It's so hard to predict because things are rapidly changing, and it's not a national COVID approach. It's an individual state approach with respect to health and safety. So what goes on in Texas may not be the same as what happens in New York City, as we all well know.
Yeah. No, that was my next question. I know nobody has a crystal ball, but if you had to envision the future, especially near future, how do you think we are going to be advised by the government to handle larger size events? There are ways to play more safe cards on simple things as organizers, like contactless payment system would be nice, less touching on whatnot. But in terms of security, because people are together, do you anticipate big capacity reductions, or do you think there'll be regulations, or do you think it'll be just trial and error?
I think initially what we're going to see is a lot of hands-off stuff. In other words, we're probably going to move to more on the security side, more of the walk-through metal detector side instead of the physical pat down, and trying not to have security people stick their hands in your bag. So a lot of places are going to go, like the NFL has, to a clear bag policy inside the venue. So you're not going to be able to bring all this stuff that you would like to have with you inside the venue. It just becomes time consuming trying to check every little item. And plus, it reduces the interaction between the security personnel and the actual fan. I think one of the things we're going to see that's going to stay with us forever is the sanitation at festivals. You're going to see incredible amounts of money and time spent on cleaning laboratories, hand sanitation stations, everything related around cleanliness, which we started to see that last spring at Okeechobee Music Festival. So a lot more due diligence as it respects to people's personal hygiene and cleaning of trash. And that is not just the festival's responsibility. I think it also comes down to the patrons too.
Yeah, I see the same in the clubs. Like where I am here in my building, we have sprays everywhere. So you come in, you put your hands up, it sprays the antibacterial soap or whatever, or hand wash, and it's just so convenient. And I just think people are getting used to it now. So it'll just be one of the things in the future. They'll just come natural. People will carry like sprays for their hands a lot more than they've ever before,
Sure. And I think that'll be the new normal, so to speak. So the sanitation part will be extremely important. It's really hard. I mean, I'm not a festival producer, but I deal with many of them. And if you take somebody's capacity of 50,000 and reduce it to 25,000, it's really difficult for them to make money. So why would they even put on a festival? I can't see social distancing working in a live event scenario. People want to be next to each other. People want to be close to the performer. I've seen these little pods, almost like the drive-in shows that we have. I don't see that working in a live festival environment. just it's too difficult to control. People just have to be responsible for themselves.
Right. We just spoke with Tim and Brett, the co-founders of Elements Lakewood Music Festival, and they told us about their COVID testing system that they have in place. So we were just chatting about, it might just take a little bit more time to get into the event, but you take a PCR test like about two to 3 days before, and then when you get on site in your car, you get a rapid test, and then you have to wait for the results of that, and then you can gain entry. So I'm, as a fan, expecting, if that's what we have to do, and it takes more time to get in, and there's added levels of security, I'm fine waiting to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I did a study for a major entertainment company on doing rapid testing for people entering the facility. Not only is it a huge cost factor, it's just not efficient. I mean, it's so difficult to test just 5,000 people in the amount of time. And then in between the time that you give the person the test, they could be in contact with somebody that has COVID that turns up positive. So now this person is positive, but they actually tested negative. So I'm not sure really what it buys you. There's a movement with a company called Clear and Health Pass to have kind of like a health passport. They're trying to figure that out now. I mean, they've made some good inroads there. But I don't know if you've seen the CDC's vaccination card. But if,
is that the one they give you when they give you a vaccine?
Yes. So they basically give it to you when you have a vaccine, and it shows that you were vaccinated. The problem is there's no security features on that card. So you could make up thousands of them on your own. And who's going to check?
Sounds like there's a guy sitting and listening to this right now that's saying blockchain is going to be the solution to fix it, right? Because on blockchain, you can never fake it. It would be impossible.
Right. So, I mean, there's some national databases they're working on to show that, okay, this person had a negative test or a positive test. It's just so time consuming. It's hard enough to search people to get them in to the festival, let alone now we're going to add this layer of testing on top. I just think it's going to be extremely difficult.
It's good to hear different perspectives, though, because again, like, this is just so interesting because there's so many things you don't think about that we've brought up today. So I think this is going to be a really helpful podcast to a lot of people listening. Go ahead, MJ.
Right now in UK, Scott, I'm sure you already know, Boris made an announcement that the festivals can open up without social distancing past June 21st. So all our brothers over there already put the tickets on sales, and everything already sold out in minutes. And, now I'm hearing Connecticut wants to open up at full. This sounds to me very sudden and very rushed. I didn't expect that. I want the events to open up more than anyone else, but I was expecting the capacities to be, maybe starting from slow and just kind of gradually go up. So we'll see what happens in UK. To my understanding, all the tickets were sold at normal capacities.
Yeah.
And so that worries me a little bit, because I think by June, we're not out of the virus yet. And, I just hope that this doesn't slow everyone down further, but I'm very optimistic. I know that we are vaccinating, what is it now? 2 million people a day. So by the time we get to June, we will be, God willing, and at a very large percent of population, adult population, being vaccinated. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, eventually we'll reach some herd immunity. When that happens, I don't know, but I know there's festivals planned for the end of April in Texas, as an example, that are camping festivals, and the governor of Texas said no, there's no limit on capacity. So some of those are actually going to move forward. So we'll see how that works out. I think one of the things that we're working, and I've been working on for the past 6 months, is with a company called Bearcom. They're a radio communications company, but they now are offering CCTV and some incident management stuff that has a lot of artificial intelligence built in. So we can use artificial intelligence in our camera system to point out potential threats. In other words, people are approaching a fence line from the outside that may try to be coming into the facility by knocking the fence line down, or reading license plates of vendors' vehicles that are coming onto the site to make sure that they've been previously cleared to meet our security requirements. So we're seeing technology on the social media side of monitoring social media for threats, and then artificial intelligence in the camera world, incident management world to help us do a better job. And these are things the fans never see.
Of course. And when it comes to, algorithms, if this is something eventually becomes a standard, if it's embedded into everyone's wristband or even the mobile app, I'm sure it will lead to good things. Technology usually is here to support the good efforts, because how do you yourself, I still can't wrap my head around how just a few people manage all of this. It's with the technology you'll be able to do things you probably want to do but are not able to because of just not having enough personnel. So yeah, very interesting to see how this all evolves.
Just the fact that, like, at a lot of big festivals, we give them a hashtag of where they can communicate with us directly in our command center. So they can send us a note saying, hey, the porta potties are overflowing, or hey, my friend's not waking up in their tent. They're breathing, but they're just not waking up. Can you send somebody to help us? And we get, I would say, at least 100 text messages a day in the command center from fans that may have a question, may have an issue. They've lost their electricity at their campsite, as an example. So we're using that technology, the instant messaging technology, to communicate directly with fans in the field.
Are there any tips for festival attendants to, anything from, I don't know, carrying the medicine if they need it with them, to, watch out for theft of Apple phones, or anything in between that you can recommend?
That's a very, very good opening salvo into many different aspects. Over the years, more recently than anything, as you know, like these, the Apple phones are, $1,100, $1,200 a piece. And unfortunately, some of these organized criminal groups will buy tickets to come to the festival to steal people's phones. We do have undercover operations to help catch those perpetrators in conjunction with the police. But take care of your personal belongings. If you don't need to bring it to the festival, don't bring it with you. Of course, everybody today, if they left their phone at home, they'd probably have a heart attack. Like it controls some bodily function, but if you can avoid bringing your phone, please don't bring it with you. But such items as prescription medication. Okay, so this is a big thing for us. People come with just a pocket full of pills. Well, we don't know that that's a legal prescription. So bring it in the original container with the prescription on it, with your ID, and the prescription has to be in your name, and it needs to be in a limited quantity. In other words, you don't need 100 antidepressants for you're only going to be there for 3 or 4 hours. Some people need antidepressants, but there's no reason you need 100 of them for an 8-hour show.
So if that's the case, you're suggesting if you have real medicine and you have to take one pill at 7:30 p.m., bring the original bottle, put the pill in it?
Correct. Yeah. And make sure that pill is the pill that goes with that particular prescription.
Yeah, don't mix up your pills, please.
Yeah.
And the same thing with vitamins. People bring vitamins in unsealed containers. Generally, we don't allow over-the-counter medications because we don't know really what's in them, and we don't have the time to test every particular type of pill that comes through.
I was going to ask another question too about getting into a festival as well. Is there any other tips for festival attendees that they can use to make the security guards' lives easier? Because I know a lot of times reviews after events, you'll read some controversial statements about security. Sometimes people feel like they overstep their boundaries, or there's like a power struggle. But on the flip side, it's like, what rights do fans have? So how do we make sure that's a happier balance there?
Exactly. And I'm always getting the phone call, it's always security's fault when something goes bad. So
right.
Of course.
You got to find somebody to blame.
And if something goes right, it's not because of them either.
Right.
No. It's the marketing and publicist people. They get all the credit.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say number one is read what's prohibited before you even come.
Mm-hmm.
So like maybe you're bringing a totem and the totem is made of steel. Well, we don't allow that in. You can have a totem, but it's got to be made of flexible plastic, and there's some rules as it relates to that. So a lot of these people that come to festivals, it's like they're taking a trip to Mars. They're bringing in enough shit with them the last 3 years. Like, you really don't need to bring all this stuff with you.
Yep.
I understand the camping part, if they're camping, and we have to search vehicles that go into camping, and it's the old days that packing 27 people into a Volkswagen. It's kind of the same thing of the stuff that we see people trying to bring in their vehicles. I mean, I've seen people bring chickens and goats and monkeys and stuff that you just wouldn't typically, take on your normal vacation. But
can you imagine this picture? You come in, you open the door, and there's a goat or a chicken.
Yeah.
I believe it.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that we see sometimes is just truly amazing. But that's why we have different layers of security management traditionally. So like if you feel like you're being taken advantage of by a security officer, don't hesitate to ask for a supervisor or somebody in security management that can come out, and it may be just a simple misunderstanding. And so we want to make sure that the fan has a great experience, because at the end of the day, we're their customer. We're there to serve them. They paid a lot of money for a ticket. They don't want to wait in line for an hour to be searched. They don't want to be abused. I don't blame them. They just want to go in and have a good time.
I'm also curious too about flow of traffic and how quickly you guys respond to that, or actually how much planning goes in, because especially at a large scale event, say there's 7 different stages, and then you have vendors, rides, all these different things happening. And how do you adjust, one, for maybe stages that are kind of built indoors that have to have different entrances and exits? How do you plan for the capacity in those? And also, let's say, you get to the first day of the event, you have all your routes planned, but all of a sudden you notice there's a really big buildup in one section that's not safe anymore because people can't easily get in and out. How do you adjust to things like that happening?
Well, it starts from the beginning in the planning phase of, we limit our capacity based on what the state's requirements are. Maybe it's 5 square foot per person or 7 square foot per person. Then it comes down to, do we have all the famous acts playing on one stage, or are we, from a production standpoint, are we spreading the music out across 7 or 8 different stages so that we can control the movement of people? Sometimes you can't control what people are going to do. I mean, there may be some act that all of a sudden is taken off. It's inside a tent, and you're just not going to go in and force 5,000 people out of this tent unless it becomes a safety hazard. One of the problems we do run into in enclosed areas, like a tent, for example, in a lightning storm, everybody wants to go under the tent. Well, it's not necessarily the safest place for us to be putting people. So trying to get those people out of the tent, and the simplest way is just turn the music off.
Right.
But we don't want to do that if we don't have to. A lot of our planning goes around evacuation. So in other words, if something happened in the facility, how are we going to get these 30,000 people out? And they generally want to go out the same way they came in, which is through the front entrance, which may not be the safest way to go out. In the case of a an incident that takes place at the front of the checkpoint. So we have to have enough emergency exits, and we look and see how many people we can get out in a specific period of time. And there's software that we can use to help us with that.
Gotcha. I mean, there's so many insights here and so many moving parts. Honestly, I give you guys so much credit.
It's overwhelming, no?
Yeah. Well, even transportation, I was going to say, I mean, the event is one thing, but I would argue even the transportation leaving the event is just as big of a deal, because you have to make sure all these kids get home, whatever substances they've been drinking all night. Now they're leaving an event, and hopefully they have a plan in place, whether they're taking a ferry or an Uber or they decide to walk home. It's like you have this whole other element of how do we get these kids home safely after the event takes place as well.
And Scott, along with me and the rest of the team, have to sit there and pray that everyone gets home safe. That's I think one part that all the kids that are running to the cars to drive home don't understand. We're not there looking at them and judging them. We're there looking at them and praying that they're sober to drive, and that they should not be driving if they're not. And this is what Ubers and taxis are for. But yeah, it's an overwhelming work. Scott, if someone wants to follow your footsteps in live events, what kind of background will it take for someone? Like, is it someone that comes from law enforcement or special type of education, or what's the right career path? Because a lot of people are watching this podcast because they want to start working in a world of events and festivals and music. So it'd be really interesting to have your perspective of what kind of a background and experience they need to, to work themselves into the area you are.
Well, I think it also first comes down to your type of personality. You have to have a very calm demeanor and be able to interface with a lot of people. I mean, in our department, we interface with the artist management team because they have a security need for their particular artist. So it has to cover the wide range of being able to deal with people. But from a job perspective, I mean, we have some of the best guys in the industry didn't come from law enforcement. They came from the security guard world. They grew up starting with a company, for example, such as Contemporary Services Corporation or any of the large security firms, and actually started as a security guard and then became a supervisor and went through a lot of different training classes that are available through FEMA. So they kind of worked their way up, starting in the basics of being a security guard. Then we have people that come from law enforcement that have retired from law enforcement or just decided, hey, I'm tired of being a cop and being abused on the streets. And, there's a niche market for people in the security industry that are interested in the live event side of it.
Yeah, and listen, this is going to be one of the most challenging jobs, honestly, and will require a lot of patience and
don't plan on sleeping.
Yeah, it's a big responsibility.
Yep, man.
I mean, we do
so many questions today. I'm like,
I mean, as I said during introductions, I look at Scott. It's like Uncle Scott is like that's who I go to. If I have questions, I don't spend my time going anywhere else. I go to Scott because I know he's gonna have answers, and it's crazy how he always does, and that's because he wakes up super early and he works on this all day and preps in a way where the answers are available.
Yeah, a lot of people say, oh, the risk department, the security people are always saying no. Well, we have a good reason to say no, unless you can give us a good reason to say yes. But, we work together as a team. Like when MJ is on site with his staff and the festival producers and the site operations people, I mean, I have to have that good working relationship with them. For example, a fence line falls over for whatever reason, I need to be able to call the site operations team and have that thing fixed like in minutes. Because we have that mutual respect for each other, we get it done. So I think that's an important part that fans typically don't see, is the interaction between all of the different departments, whether it's marketing, credentialing, box office. It extremely important to us.
Yeah, communication is definitely key. I just hope anybody listening has a lot of appreciation now. And the next time they're at an event in the future and there's a rainstorm coming or they're trying to get home or something like that, I just hope everyone now keeps in mind all of the moving parts that are in place to keep you safe. And I have much more of a deeper appreciation for everything now.
And that everyone is on the same page. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to cancel a festival. Nobody want, like, everything is done for safety. Even when it comes with staff, like Scott will sometimes spot a photo team, going on a lift without their belts and security belts. And, there'll be very, very quick yellings because he treats everyone like we are his kids. And like, what if they fall over, So he's constantly zoomed in, and if he walks by you, he's not gonna even say hi because he's focused and he's just like, yeah, it's a lot of work. And as you said, I really would love for the fans listening to understand what kind of people you have on the other side and how much work goes into making sure that you are safe.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that COVID has brought to us unexpectedly is a lot of people in our business, the working side, haven't worked in a year or more. And you lose that muscle memory that you gain, whether you're, building a fence or erecting scaffolding on a stage. And this becomes a huge safety concern for me, is that people are not up to practice in their particular job. So we're going to spend a lot of time when we open back up, making sure people are aware of what's going on, that they're fully trained, that they understand all the safety precautions that need to be taken place. And a lot of the people that we've worked with over the years now have taken other jobs. They just couldn't be out of work that long. And so we're going to have a lot of new people that are working at festival sites, which isn't a bad thing. It's just more we trying to get them educated as to what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah. And I mean, on the flip side, you're going to have people so excited for events and things to come back. You got to make sure they're not overdoing it and going a little bit too crazy at their first events back. So it's going to be a balance.
Oh, that's
Mamma mia.
And Jay's like, oh God.
Yeah, we're all excited to get back to work. I'm sure it's going to come very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And we're going to be faced with new challenges every day, and it's how we adapt to those changes. And I have festival producers that are just literally crying on my shoulder when we have to pull the trigger and cancel an event. And I said, well, do you realize you bought insurance? And they're like, oh yeah, I kind of forgot about that. I said, well, that's what insurance is for, to make you whole in the event these things happen. So you're not going to lose $5 or $6 million. And then it's all smiles. But at the end of the day, you've got 30,000 people and it's sunny out. They don't see the thunderstorm that's 25 miles away, and you're telling them they need to leave the venue. They don't understand it. And our job becomes really difficult when you're trying to clear 30,000 people and explain to them that a storm is coming.
Jeez, I can't even imagine.
I can't believe it's 2021 already. I just like, I can't. Yeah, I'm so pumped about the events, guys. Well, Emma, are there questions for Scott before we come to the end of this really, really good episode?
No, I think we covered everything. I would say my last question to you, Scott, is what is the most rewarding part about your job?
The last song.
See, I have a different question. Now that you have gotten yourself into electronic music world, who's your favorite electronic music artist?
Oh, that's a really good question. I still have to go with, Tiesto, one of my favorites, and Armin. I mean, being at the age at being 64 years old, you got to support the old guys,
The Dutch guys always win. There's always going to be Dutch guys winning, huh?
Yeah, they kind of help start this off here in the U.S. in some realms, and every venue is a little bit different. Every music genre is a bit different, but it's great because I'm surrounded by a lot of people that are younger than me, and I can learn a lot from them. I mean, I grew up using a rotary phone, so like the whole technology piece is really pretty cool for me. And they can learn from me, and I can learn from them. So it's a great opportunity for somebody like myself to interface with with the people that I get to interface with.
Mm-hmm. And yeah,
it's amazing.
yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time, Scott, and sharing all of this with us and the fans.
You guys
Yeah,
have
we appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Okay. Cheers.
Bye. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Scott, for coming on and spending some time with us today. MJ, what were some of your takeaways from this conversation?
I think it goes back to a lot of the conversations we're having. If you guys want to get into live events and this is the type of work you like to do, reach out to us. Maybe we'll ask Scott if he can give some advice. I don't know personally anyone who is like at the higher ranks.
Mm-hmm.
This is the person that truly understands his work really well. And, when he said, I work for you guys, he meant it. When he's on the festival side, he's there to protect everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And that's for sure. And I think that there are legit complaints from security all the time from different festivals, and that's probably never going to go away just because of a scale,
Mm-hmm.
because not everyone's going to be unfortunately perfect, but it's people like Scott that are there to train the staff and to make them better for us. And ultimately, he cares about the fans and the staff on both ends. And thank God for people like him, because as I mentioned before, we had too many close calls where he really saved the day and made sure people were safe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, it was really interesting to hear his perspective on everything from their planning security from 5 to 8 months out from an event to how they make decisions about the weather and the tips and advice too for festival attendees as far as like security and international travel was all super interesting as well. And it's good things to keep in mind. I feel like the best part about this podcast is what you said. We're allowing these industry professionals to come on and talk to us about how they can make, people's experience better. And I think it's just better to have an understanding of all the moving parts that are in place to make sure you have a safe event. And it will be interesting to see how festivals come back now with all of the safety protocols in place for something completely different, which is COVID. But it was interesting, his opinion and how things might change. I'm very curious to see how it all rolls out.
Great point. Yeah, it is very interesting to register with US. What do you say it was called? When you
Pass?
travel? No, not the Clear Pass, but yeah, whatever he's
Department
mentioned.
of something, yeah.
Yeah, so what he was saying is when people got stuck during COVID and they were flying everyone back, I think Aaron Rodgers was stuck like in Chile or something, I heard. And that's how it works. So that's an interesting perspective.
Yep.
And yeah, it was Clear. I know that I was one of the first members of Clear. I still had to go to their office in Manhattan when the machines were in Manhattan and you can fingerprint yourself and do it. I mean, this was maybe 6-7 years ago or so. So they now have massive technology and I've been hearing their name a lot. So let's see if they were going to be integrated in any of the festival security just to speed up the process and validate everyone. And then eventually, potentially link this to the vaccines or tests as well.
Yep. Well, like you said, I think technology is here to help us and make things better. So I'm really interested to see how that goes. And I mean, I'm all for sanitation being of more of an importance at events. We have cleaner bathrooms. Everyone will be happy.
Me and you should release festival sprays where you like spray, so you can carry it with you, because going around looking for soap is going to be an issue. Yeah, that's a good idea. All right, guys, stay tuned for the sprays.
Yep. And even what he said too, I thought was interesting. I mean, we'll see, even talking about the clear bags that I know they use that at Giant Stadium, MetLife and things for sporting events, but that would be very interesting because I know a lot of people bring hydration packs so that they can have free water all weekend. And I don't really know of any clear hydration packs, but there you go. Companies, get on it.
That's right. Let's business ideas.
Exactly.
That's what we do. We just want to help everyone win together.
Exactly. But this was awesome. I'm glad we had Scott on today.
A lot of good episodes are also lining up right now. We're trying to kind of balance it. So it's interesting content from different perspectives. So please stay tuned. Got some national and international guests coming up. If you can just do us one favor, is be vocal about this episodes. Would love to hear what you liked and didn't like. The more feedback you can give us, the better we can become for you. We're doing this for you, not for us. So help us deliver you a better 60-minute podcast by just voicing and giving us feedback and telling us who you want to see.
Yep. And you can stay in touch with us on YouTube. You can drop a comment over there on the Festival Insider YouTube channel, at Festival Insider on Twitter and Instagram. And if you guys could make this your Instagram stories today and tag us, that would be awesome. MJ is at the one and only. I am at Emma Capotis on Instagram. We would love to hear from you. Our DMs are always open. And thank you for listening today.
And I got a microphone today, so you heard me better, huh?
Yeah, I hope we're making improvements with every episode. Hope you guys appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for listening and watching. We love you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.